Everyone, my name is Kelly, and I work for a small software company here in Portland. And I don't have any slides because this was kind of spur of the moment, but it was kind of spurred by, there's been a lot of talk about involving engineers and documentation and sort of how to get to that place. I just wanted to share with you something that we've tried. We started this past year, and we call it engineering pre-docs. And let me pull out my notes from my presentation here. So the context is that I'm the sole documentation person for our company. And I've also recently been moved part-time onto our product team because they figured it was cheaper to catch things in the beginning than have me catch them at the end when I was writing the docs for it. So what we had was we wanted to get our engineers more involved. So it's also part of that philosophy of not coming up with the perfect solution, but getting started with it. So also part of the problem we wanted to address was to streamline my workflow because I was spending a lot of time in Jira trying to piece together the puzzle of what this new feature entailed and then kind of the back-end things that our support team needed. So we came up with 8 questions that are attached as a subtask to the engineer's story. And those 8 questions came about because I had a couple of questions that I needed answered. And those questions were, what changed? And then another question was, did anything in the UI change? So something like a before and after, what happened? And then we got our QA team involved and said, well, you know, what do you need to know? What's critical for you to know during testing? So they had a couple of questions they added too. And then our support team, what were the critical things that they need to have answered? So we put those together, and now we have a sort of a philosophy that dev isn't done until doc is complete. And so we can't close an iteration until those pre-docs are written. And I just wanted to share with you, because I can hear there's some hesitation sometimes about asking your engineers to do something like that. But our engineers, the response was overwhelming in terms of they were so happy to have something they could fill in, because they were spending a lot of time writing Confluence pages that would go on and were excellent, incredible pieces of documentation, but that nobody was using. Because again, Confluence, it was difficult to find, they weren't tagged well. And so they just wanted to have something to do. And so now they get, if a story slips into an iteration that I'm not aware of and I don't have that subtask on there, they'll ping me and say, hey, Kel, where's the pre-doc on that? Because they want to get it done, because then they can consider their task complete. And so the questions that we have, I've chatted with people at my table, the questions that we have aren't as important necessarily as how we got there, which is, again, I needed some critical questions answered. Our QA team needed something that would help their job a little bit easier, and then our support team needed some essential questions answered, but I promised that I would read the questions that we did put together. But again, it's going to be based on what you need. The questions that we put together are, again, in your own words, our engineers are really smart people, and I don't want to know about the code changes necessarily. I just want them to explain to me in their words what changed. So that's what it is. And also, too, the expectation of the time they should spend on this is about 15 minutes. So briefly describe the fix or the feature, before and after, what changed. Because we're a marketplace-specific product, sometimes there's an assumption that a fix or a feature applies to all markets, but that's a question that comes up all the time in support, so they indicate which market it applies to. Did the UI change? Before and after screenshots get attached in the subtask? Was a configuration added? Because we do a lot of custom configurations for our customers, and so what was the configuration? Oftentimes that gets lost somewhere in the documentation. Were there any schema changes? Because our product runs on a SQL database, or SQL server, so were there any schema changes? That bites you so often. That's a little piece of information that gets lost sometimes. Also, were there any data migration steps? And then the last one, was there any logging added or changed? So that's been incredibly helpful, and again, the response has been overwhelming from all the teams that use that documentation. It's not perfect, because we don't really have a way to archive or access that. They're just subtasks on the main story right now, but it's a start, and at some point in the future we'll, again, develop maybe that perfect system where we can access that information. But I just wanted to share that experience with you. It's kind of like a step in the right direction, and what it really accomplishes is capturing the information at the time that the engineer does the work, and then they can move on to the next thing. So, thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. All right, up next is Ed. He's going to be talking about something that got smudged on the paper.
Just make sure the Make sure this works. Okay, the problem is that I'm going to talk about is an impedance mismatch. You have scientists and they have high-powered workstations or even a supercomputer, and you have readers on a mobile phone, and the science journalist is caught in the middle. So the target users for this are science journalists for initially with a mobile audience. Now there's some pretty stiff challenges here. Reproducibility. The readers expect you to show your work. Constraints of the devices. Mobiles have very small screens, limited bandwidth, limited processor capacity, and so on. And distracted or multitasking readers. Basically, a mobile device reader is one eyeball and one thumb. So what I'm putting together is a system that for science journalists to be able to write for mobiles. Components are RStudio IDE, which is the kind of gold standard for reproducible research, and R Markdown, which is, it's Markdown basically, it's an interface to Pandoc that generates HTML and CSS. And ROpenSci, which is another collection of scientific open source software, and Mozilla tools. The Gaia building blocks and the Brick, which is web components. And the plan here, first of all, I'm looking for sponsors. I've applied for a Knight Foundation prototype grant. They take ideas that are kind of up in the air like this, and they give you 6 months to build it and do a demo. I don't think it's going to take me 6 months because I've got most of the components already. And acquire the rep.journ.mobi domain. I've already done that. In fact, this slide presentation, that's where the slide presentation is. This slide presentation was done with the precursor of that. And then to integrate RStudio and R Markdown with the Mozilla tools. And then end-to-end testing on a ZTE Open. A ZTE Open is a Firefox phone. It's kind of 320 by 480 screen. It's basically a browser grafted on top of Android. If you have an Android phone and you have the Firefox browser, you have essentially the same software. It's just that's all that's in the Firefox phone. There's none of the other Android stuff. And I'm going to do a prototype story, probably from finance. I wanted to do it with a weather model, but I just don't. I don't have access to the kind of data that I do from finance. And the stretch goal is to make this work with the Android browser. That'll make it accessible to a lot more people because there aren't many Firefox phones in the United States. There's about 500,000 of them in the world. And extensive reader testing. So licenses, everything's open source. The components that I'm using, the code's all GPL, Affero, and the Mozilla stuff's all Mozilla license, of course. And the documentation will be Creative Commons, share alike. And location, right now it's in a private repo on GitLab. I'm going to keep it private for a fair amount of time because I'm trying to look for sponsors and they may have their own ideas about how to sponsor open source software. And the ETA for the demo is Open Source Bridge in June of this year. And if anybody wants to get access to this before then, send me a tweet.
Thank you, Ed. All right. Next up, we're going to hear about a Risk Docathon by Corey.
All right. I'll keep it really short and sweet. How many here have played Risk? It's a fun game, right? Wouldn't it be awesome if you could play Risk and create documentation? Well, that's what we did at MindTouch. So we needed to shore up some of our documentation. We had a big backlog of items, and we pretty much extended it to the whole company. Said, hey, do you want to have fun? Do you want to create documentation? Do you want to drink beer? Do you like eating pizza? Do you want to create documentation? And extended it. We had a lot of great people come. I'm just going through here. I'm going to highlight the rules that we put in place so that you at your company can have your own Risk Docathon. Yeah, that's somebody else testing, so I won't have any slides, you won't be able to see anything. But we had teams of 2, so they set up teams of 2, anybody could pick what team they were on or who they were associated with. They pick an article from a list, so they have a list already pre-populated that you can pull information from. And then based upon that, we had some kind of basic guidelines that the article had to meet in order to be accepted. Once it was accepted, then you were able to get a card. Now the intent, to tie it back into Risk, is that you wanted the biggest team. So you wanted the most people on your documentation team, and then the team at the end that had the most won. So if you submitted an article, everything looked good, you got a card, you could steal a member from a different team, and then the more documentation you created, the more cards you got, the more team members you got, and then ultimately in the end, that's the team that won. My team was Mom Corp, for any of you Futurama people out there. We were so close to winning, so close. But unfortunately, my perfectionist didn't serve well in this game. If you did not get your doc approved, so say for instance you had issues with it, you weren't meeting the guidelines, if you had spelling mistakes, because they were strongly discouraged, you had to do a push-up for every spelling mistake. We encourage health at MindTouch. And if you didn't get at least 8 out of the 10 requirements for the documentation, you had to sing a karaoke song. That is not a deterrent for me, so I was purposely making some mistakes. But other than that, this Docathon was really successful. We had 29 new articles created. This was over a span of about 4 hours with everyone working on it. 70 updates to existing articles, so across 70 articles. And we had 31 memes created, which was just going back and forth over the chat. So everyone was creating new memes. And the best one, I won't be able to show it, but it says, so I'm having an awesome time when I realize I'm writing documentation. And it shows a kid that looks like he's drunk. But that's about it. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to me, CoreyG@mindtouch.com, or Corey Gantz on Twitter. You'll probably see I have some of the hashtags. And I can share this information with you so you can do your own Risk Docathon. Thank you.
But I need to at least look at them now.
Do you need yours to plug in, or is this for you just to read off of? I can do either way. Right. So,
Hi,
I think
I'm Bob.
Close with you next.
And I was intended to do these with slides. It's really a slide-specific presentation, but in the interest of time, I'll just look at my slides and tell you what I'm going to talk about. And I'm here from Conway, and I'm an instructional designer, really more of a pure instructional designer than a tech writer. I'm really in awe of the technical skill in this room, but I do more pure training. And in listening to Christina Elmore's really good talk at the end of yesterday, which she talked about the difference between documentation and, those aren't mine, documentation and presentation. As an instructional designer, I came up to Christina afterwards and said, yeah, but what about training? And specifically, what about e-learning? Where does that fit in? Is that documentation? Is that presentation? And we kind of both agreed it's probably something different from both of those. So I wanted to talk a little bit about training in relation to those other types of things we're talking about, and a technique that I'm looking into to create good training. So if you were looking at my slides, I have 3 premises or assumptions here that maybe you'd agree with and maybe you wouldn't, and they are: information isn't knowledge. Someone earlier said information isn't communication. Knowledge isn't performance, and telling isn't training. It's something we like to say in the training world a lot. So what instructional designers like to say is that training results in behavior change. If it doesn't, it's really not training. And we also like to say that you learn by doing, or another way is behavior change comes from practice. So how do you get training to do that? You may agree with me that those are good definitions of training or not. A method I want to share is from, again, wish I had slides, from Kathy Moore. Is there any people here in the audience who have heard of Kathy Moore and action mapping? Not a lot of hands. So good thing to share with you. Kathy's a great thinker, thought leader in instructional design. Action mapping is designed to produce compelling activities that have business impact. The basic steps of action mapping: identify a business goal. Work with this. You do this in a meeting with your SMEs and users, stakeholders. Identify a business goal that's concrete and measurable. Not, make help desk people better, but reduce help desk calls by X amount, or resolve 90% of all help desk calls in the first call. Something that you can measure. Then identify the actual goals, the actual performances on the job that you would need to do to meet those goals. Then design activities in your training where people practice doing those actions. And finally, identify, and this is important, the minimum amount of information required to perform those actions. So what's really different, I have a nice fancy slide here, but this is a key point, is that activities become the core unit of your instruction. Topics are no longer the core unit of your instruction. So she does call this action mapping, and if I was showing you the map here, I would show you do this on a piece of paper or on an application. You put your goal in the middle, resolve help desk calls. Your business actions extend off of those goals. Your activities are designed to have people practice doing those performances. And then finally, only if it is absolutely necessary for people to have some conceptual information, conceptual knowledge, do you teach that knowledge. Maybe, say you're teaching help desk people, they happen to be overseas. Maybe you decide that without some multicultural training, they cannot do the tasks that they need to do. Then you might teach some stuff about multicultural communication, only if it's directly related to performing those tasks. And that, in a nutshell, is action mapping. Thanks.
And then you can go with
That's about all you're going to get. So we're going to talk about finding best practices from a dead craft and why this happens a lot. So we're going to talk about deriving and rediscovering best practices and making documentation from a dead craft, that dead craft being the craft of casting metal type. So We'll start with basically right here, we're bewildered. And it was in 2002 when I was walking down the street in Seattle. I was working sort of as a sysadmin at a .com, and I saw this woman setting type in a bay window. I'd never seen anyone setting type in person before, but I knew exactly what she was doing, and I sort of like turned my heels and my jaw dropped, right? Because I thought this was gone. I spent the next 3 months trying to be her apprentice, and I worked in this shop. And I spent endless afternoons wiping down these pieces of metal here with like vegetable oil and cleaning them with like ammonia. It smelled like cat piss. Now, printing is really great, right? Type basically made the modern era, right? Without type, we don't have the communication, transfer of knowledge, and it's very romantic. You have these notions that, oh my God, I'm getting a printer, it's gonna be like soft lighting, hand presses, all this stuff, it's gonna be fantastic, right? But it's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of blah, 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 blah. Also, because all of this stuff just basically became commercially useless in the span of about 20 years, no one saved documentation, right? Like everyone did their own thing. If you were a printer, you kept your stuff here, you retired, and you basically threw it all away. If you made type, you threw it all away. All the documentation left behind was like 100 years old, and it was really hard to read. And I didn't think anyone made type anymore. I wanted this. I wanted shiny, new type. Brand new. But I thought that I can only get it from like, junk stores and stuff. Turns out you can actually make it. But the problem is, there was only one place that I knew of, and I ended up working here in San Francisco. It's apprenticeship at a place called M&H Type. I did this for 3 years, and I thought to myself, wow, this is fantastic, but no one can make new typefaces. We're just making the old stuff. We're still basically just feeding off of the leftovers. This talk is about how your assumptions are always wrong. And it turns out that, as I became more and more interested in this stuff, it got more precise. This is basically some Balmer cues under high magnification to make sure they're lined up right. Sorry, I'm talking too fast. But it turns out, you make all this brand shiny new type. This was made last weekend. This is why Troy saw that picture and he was like, cool. This is half of Paradise Lost. It's about 2 tons, right? So when you're done with the book, you melt it back down. It's kind of fun. You use a potato. The potato mixes up the metal. It smells like French fries. This all leads up to 2005 when I finally got a chance to work in BC with a guy named Jim Rimmer to cut this Cree syllabary. So these letter forms are basically representing the consonants of the Cree language, right? And the cool thing about this, it's like Hebrew. These letter forms are just the consonants. If you turn them 90 degrees, because there are only 4 vowels, you get one vowel, the other vowel, the other vowel, and the other vowel, right? So that's actually really handy because we made like basically a master when we got 4 characters out of it. I learned from Jim, and this is another thing, right? There's this guy in his basement in Vancouver who knows how to make typefaces, but no one else knows how to do this anymore. So the job was basically to go learn from him and absorb as much as possible. So we basically made a bunch of typeface, a bunch of mats, and I'll call them here because I brought some with me. So there's that piece here. This is Bristol board cut with an X-Acto knife, right? Very, very precise. But you put this in an engraving machine, and that thing is 1/1000th of an inch wide, right? So you get something much smaller. You get this piece here. And it's hard to see, but this is that thing brought down by about 4 times. And then you get this tiny little thing, right? Which you can't see because you're up here, but I can show it to you because it's that thing. And it's absolutely gorgeous. But that's because, the knowledge is there, right? And we made more of these. And this is the first create type in 150 years. And that's our first proof with all the mots on it. Even prettier. And the last day he was like, here, I made you a pigeon. It's over here. This is the pigeon. So what happened was that in the span of 3 or 4 years, me and other people gathered information, and we started this C.C. Stern Type Foundry in Portland, Oregon, right? And if you give us money, we give you this thing that looks like a Muni Fast Pass, which is pretty cool. Rebecca and Joe, we work together on the machines. We relearn these processes, and people seem to like us. So come visit metaltype.org, and thank you.
Hello, my name is Aaron Wolf, and I live here in this area as of last summer. I would like to share with you a little bit about my background and why it relates to thinking about documentation from a different perspective, but I'm going to basically talk about the same things everybody else has been talking about, which is the value of documenting and sharing ideas. And my particular background is I actually have been teaching music lessons for the last about a decade, I guess, most of my adult life. And at some point I decided that I was pretty annoyed about the quality of the educational resources out there, and I decided to go to the library and look at the different guitar methods that they had and figure out what sort of resources were the best. And without going into all the details, I'm a little obsessive, and I ended up going through and cataloging about 800 different titles and reading through every single detail and making notes to myself. And rather than just have that for myself, I really felt like I should make the types of things that I'm figuring out useful to other people. And I haven't published what I would like to do with that yet, but one of the things that got me connected from going from teaching music lessons was getting into what some people in the music world would call participatory music versus presentational music. So instead of me going up here and saying, listen to me, you should just sit there and be still and, you know, look at how awesome I am. I found myself, actually, I got absorbed in barbershop harmony, which is where a bunch of people end up getting together and singing old-time harmony, which some of you may be familiar with. But what my experience was going to a place like a convention hall like this, and people are hanging out, and there's some people sing, but then afterwards, everybody's out in the hall, and we would be singing a bunch of chords from some song and people teaching each other things, and if you walked by and just looked at us like you looked kind of interested, somebody would say, hey, do you sing? You want to come sing with us? And you might have no idea what you're doing, but every person who's walking by is invited to come participate because it's that type of a community and that type of a culture. And so I found that really inspiring, and I haven't been focusing on performing in a while, and I really care about teaching and sharing knowledge with others and inviting anybody interested, and I want that sort of a world for the type of community and culture that I want to live in. And I took that ethos when I decided to try getting involved in open source software, free culture, that sort of thing, which is connected to those things. So a couple years ago when I installed a Linux system for the first time, I found myself trying to figure out how to deal with it, and I found some of that same type of a culture where I had no idea what I was doing, but in a matter of months, I actually have a personal relationship with the guy in Portugal who actually puts together my computer system. And it's not documented very well, and I had no idea what commands to do or how to run anything. And I literally go to the one guy who put together the actual system, and he goes, hey, well, you should try this and this. And did you try this new thing I just put out? And it's bizarre because this is not a way to scale anything. How can he work on the system if he's helping me personally? And it's a totally different experience than I have when I'm a customer of, I used to use Apple computers, and I would contact some proprietary developer and sort of try to find some documentation or bug somebody or try to get help, and it's a totally different experience. So I got involved through that in starting a nonprofit organization, which I'm founding. If you want to talk to me about it later, we're not operational yet, but it's called snowdrift.coop, and it's a cooperative organization designed to promote that type of thing and support projects that are free, open types of projects. And the main thing is I've taken the opportunity to document every single thing all along the way because I came from zero. I'm not a developer, and what I did is when I went and said, well, how do I do this? Okay, I need a website, we're doing this, I need to do some graphic. Okay, well, I need somebody to help me, and I've documented every little thing. And the main feature that I think about in our documentation is that I have volunteers who don't even have any programming background, and my co-founder, who's an experienced developer, has this attitude that is the same as I have. If somebody walks by and goes, that's kind of neat, I like what you're doing, he goes, hey, well, do you want to learn to help us out? You could code or something. And they go, I don't know anything about this. And he goes, well, we'll teach you. And from ground zero, we have volunteers who didn't even program before, who are just learning as part of being involved in our project, and we're trying to document everything all along the way. So I think it's really valuable to think about reaching out to those people and seeing if you can actually get them involved in a project. And if you document things as you go, you can get what I hope will be a valuable resource that I can pass on to everybody else and make it easier for whoever comes after me. Thank you.
All right. Do realize we're running slightly late, but we got free books gifted to us and lots of awesome lightning talks. So there's gonna be one more lightning talk, but just to remind you, this is the part of the day where we split up between downstairs and upstairs. And downstairs is going to be bringing UA into the UX and vice versa. So if you care about UX and that kind of good stuff, you might want to gather your things, and after this, kind of head downstairs to Lolo's room. And the talk up here is going to be scale for support without losing personality. So just those are your two choices. But for now, let's have our last lightning talk.
Thank you. Okay, so I don't play bagpipes, but I figured I needed to step up my game a little bit here and do something different for a lightning talk. So I'm going to read Green Eggs and Ham. As you can see, I have a very eclectic reading taste, so some Objective-C books, some SQLite stuff, but Green Eggs and Ham. Now, you can all read along if you want to. This is a fun book. I am Sam. I am Sam. Sam I am. That's Sam I am, that's Sam I am. I do not like that Sam I am. Do you like green eggs and ham? I do not like them, Sam I am. I do not like green eggs and ham. Would you like them here or there? I would not like them here or there. I would not like them anywhere. I do not like green eggs and ham. I do not like them, Sam I am. Would you like them in a house? Would you like them with a mouse? I do not like them in a house. I do not like them with a mouse. I do not like them here or there. I do not like them anywhere. I do not like green eggs and ham. I do not like them, Sam I am. Would you eat them in a box? Would you eat them with a fox? Not in a box, not with a fox. Not with a house, not with a mouse. I would not eat them here or there. I would not eat them anywhere. I would not eat green eggs and ham. I do not like them, Sam I am. Would you, could you in a car eat them, here they are. I would not, could not in a car. Would you like them? You will see. You may like them in a tree. I would not, could not in a tree, not in a car. Let me be. I do not like them in a box. I do not like them with a fox. I do not like them in a house. I do not like them with a mouse. I would not eat them here or there. I do not like them anywhere. I do not like green eggs and ham. I do not like them, Sam I am. A train, a train, a train, a train. Could you, would you on a train? Not on a train, not in a tree, not in a car. Sam, let me be. I would not, could not in a box. I could not, would not with a fox. I will not eat them with a mouse. I would not eat them in a house. I would not eat them here or there. I would not eat them anywhere. I do not like green eggs and ham. I do not like them, Sam I am. Say, in the dark, here in the dark, would you, could you in the dark? I would not, could not in the dark. Would you, could you in the rain? I would not, could not in the rain. Not in the dark, not on a train, not in a car, not in a tree. I do not like them, Sam, you see. Not in a house, not in a box, not with a mouse, not with a fox. I will not eat them here or there. I do not like them anywhere. You do not like green eggs and ham? I do not like them, Sam I am. Could you, would you with a goat? I would not, could not, with that goat. Okay, I changed that. Would you, could you on a boat? I could not, would not on a boat, I will not with a goat. I will not eat them in the rain, I will not eat them on a train, not in the dark, not in a tree, not in a car. You let me be. I do not like them in a box, I do not like them with a fox. I will not eat them in a house, I will not eat them with a mouse. I do not like them here or there, I will not eat them anywhere. I do not like green eggs and ham. I do not like them, Sam. I am. You do not like them, so you say. Try them, and you may. Try them and you may, I say. Sam, if you let me be, I will try them, you will see. All right. Say, I like green eggs and ham. I do. I like them, Sam, I am. And I would eat them in a boat, and I would eat them with a goat. And I would eat them in the rain, I would eat them on a train, in a car, and in a tree. They are so good, you see. So I'll eat them in a box, and I will eat them with a fox. I will eat them in a house, I will eat them with a mouse. And I will eat them here or there. Say, I will eat them anywhere. I do so like green eggs and ham. Thank you, Sam I am.